Get in the know. Non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com. Purple Daily, presented by Surly Brewing Company.
Marks, we know that what we want to find. We want leadership. We want somebody who's going to bring the rally the collective over the individual. We want somebody who's got vision, who can communicate, who's got a solid football foundation, who understands how football's interconnected and what that means. So that's been our focus in these last few days, really honing in on what we want. In terms of specific names, we're going to meet after this, after I get done with you great people, and we'll talk about that further.
Welcome into Purple Access, sponsored by, of course, our friends at Surly Brewing and also TCL. Enjoy more with TCL TV. That was, in case you don't know, new Vikings GM Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, who was introduced today by the Vikings. I'm Judd Zulgad. Chip Scoggins, my former partner on the Viking beat at the Star Tribune, now columnist at Star Tribune, as always on Purple Access, and EP Declan Goff. All right, Chipper. So I watched the entire thing. You attended it. Give me your initial impressions of a new GM who called the assembled media, "you wonderful people," which is about as different from Rick Spielman and Zim as you could possibly get.
You know how they say you always hire your opposites?
It's true.
They hired the opposite. You could not walk away from there and not be impressed with this guy's personality, demeanor, the way he spoke, his lack of ego. That does not mean this is going to work.
Right.
Let's be that up front. But you can see why the Wills and that search committee gravitated towards him and really liked his personality. I mean, he's an impressive guy. I mean, he just is. And it's, I liked his thoughtfulness. He's obviously incredibly bright.
Yeah.
We didn't get a whole lot of specifics. Specifically, even he wouldn't even go down the road of whether he has final say on the 53, which he does. I mean, it's in his contract. I mean, he's the GM. He's going to have final 53, but final say. But I found it interesting that Judd, based on everything that came out after Spielman and Zimmer were fired, and for us to see the level of dysfunction that was taking place inside that organization between GM, coach, player, whatever. There were a lot of miserable people, I think, in that building. Oh, yeah. And they set out to find someone who's going to have a totally different regime, totally different voice, totally different way about going business. And they found him. They found somebody that I think is going to kind of take the consensus. Now, whether that works or not,
right?
We'll find out. I mean, it is. I do find it. I've gotten a couple emails or tweets saying, "This is going to be a disaster." Well, I'm glad we figured that out, solve that in the first 24 hours. So we could. I mean, how do you know? Right. I don't know if it's going to be good, bad, or indifferent. We have no idea. Let's give the guy more than 5 minutes to make a decision before we render a verdict.
And both ways.
In both ways.
You're exactly
I don't know
right.
if it's going to be a home run. Yeah.
Why do we have, and I think it's because guys are polished now as far as what they bring to the table. And also every press conference like that is carried by a team's website on TV. But here's the one thing I don't get. And it's now become the common thing. And look, I am Mr. Race to Judgment. So I am not for 1 second saying I'm not okay. But what is our need to try and pass any judgment at all off a first press conference? I mean, Gerson Rosas was brilliant. His kids ran up to him and we're like, "Oh, that's going to be the guy. That's going to be the guy." And I'm with you. I'm not saying that Kwesi's going to fail. And I'm not saying he's going to be great. I don't think we know. And I do think the Vikings are taking an interesting approach here and a very interesting chance. But, Derek Falvey, Rocco Baldelli, Chip, Gerson Rosas, why do we need to be like the press conference meant everything?
Yeah, because we're a society and people love first impressions, right?
Why?
I don't know. That's a human existence.
I mean, you're right.
we need a psychologist for that.
I guess.
We just love first impressions, and that's why always, everybody says make a good first impression because that's what people remember. And listen, I think I've only been at one open coach or executive introductory press conference where they didn't win the press conference. Where you've had it. It's pretty easy for someone to make a great first impression in those situations because typically the person you got rid of, you're either mad at or you didn't like or people were done with. And so the new person is always going to be the greatest thing ever. But I'll say this. I mean, I walked away there impressed with this guy. I didn't walk away saying this is going to be a home run and this thing there would, start mapping out the parade route. But I said, at least I liked his approach. I liked it. It just felt like a breath of fresh air, to be honest with you. Yes. Considering, the personalities that we've had there. And that's my thing is like, this is, really outside the box hire because is this the first analytics guy? And we can talk about the analytics and all that, but the non-scout traditional to become a GM in the NFL.
I think the Browns.
I've heard different things.
I think the Browns tried this initially. I want to say in 2016 with what was his name? I wrote about him last night. A Brown. Yeah. But anyway, the Browns basically tried to lift the baseball approach, and it didn't work. And so they hired, I believe it was
Sashi Brown.
Sashi.
Thank you, Declan.
Sashi Brown.
And so the Browns then fired him and went to John Dorsey, who had been a big-time scout with the Packers, and then went to the Chiefs. Yeah. And now the Browns are back to basically a front office that I don't think brags about it, but embraces this. So it's not the first, but I'm with you. It's a gamble, and it's really intriguing.
And the thing that to me is like, okay, you tried the old model for years.
Yeah.
And it got you mediocrity. So why don't you try something fresh and different? I mean, yes, it's there. I think there's a high risk reward here. But to say, you got to get a football guy because this guy, you got to get a football guy. It's like, well, why? I mean, you had a football guy and you hated it. Everybody hated that football. So, and you moved on. So why not try something different? So I like going into this, when I saw the two finals, I would have taken the football guy, Ryan Poles. I just would have probably. That's my own bias, just because he'd come up through the.
Me too.
But I'm not going to sit here and say because they have a guy who's never been a scout saying, well, this can't work. This is why? I mean, I don't understand why we feel like it has to be a certain way.
I think because we're tied to beliefs about how things should run, and as much as we try and divorce ourselves and say, "Oh no, I'm open to change," when change actually comes, we're like, "That's not a good idea."
I was the same way. Judd, I was the same way. I said Poles had the safer resume because he came up through the scouting. So I'm probably being a little bit hypocritical.
Poles also intrigued you, or at least in my case, because of his experience with that franchise in particular.
The franchise, yes.
The hand that I read that he at least had in the Mahomes drafting, which was not the slam dunk it now appears to be. And so I also was intrigued by the fact that he could bring knowledge of success. I'm not sure that this is the case with this one. I honestly think the ceiling on this move is incredibly high. Like, it could be great.
Yeah.
I also think the floor is huge as well. It could be a disaster, but I just have no clue. I just wish we wouldn't fall so in love with, well, he made a good impression. To your point, after Spielman and Zim, you could have brought up any number of folks who, oh yeah, they're great because you're right. They're not Rick and they're not Mike. And we were flat out, for the most part, tired of Rick and Mike.
Yeah, and just their style and the way they delivered it, and it felt so standoffish and everything that it just felt like you had a normal human conversation with him today. And after the press conference,
wonderful people. He called you wonderful.
Yeah,
and I know you ain't wonderful, but that's
ain't wonderful. No, I'm a person. I'm wonderful. No, and we had an off the record thing with him afterwards, after the press conference with some of the media members, where it's just kind of get to know each other, and it was nice to just have a conversation. Like, where are you from? What, those types of things. And it's like, does that mean he's going to get a free pass? No. Is he going to get criticized? Absolutely. And so it still comes down to, what are you going to do with Cousins? Can you find and develop a franchise quarterback? How are you going to manage the salary cap? And those are the things. And let's be honest, who he picks as head coach is probably going to if he picks somebody that's unpopular, people are going to think that this is the first time he's going to get criticized, right?
Right. So, not asking for specific names, but what is your feeling about the direction that they should go with the choice of Mike's replacement head coach?
Yeah. I don't care offense, defense. And I know we're seeing in the playoffs, or the Final Four. Yeah, the Final Four are all offensive guys.
Yes, sir.
Is that coincidence or is that the way you should be looking? I don't know. I think ideally you have an offensive guy because that's the way the league is going. But I don't think it's if you find a guy who's the right leader, if you think D'Amico Ryans is this unbelievable leader, he's the next Mike Tomlin.
Yes.
Find a good offensive coordinator. Tell him to go get the best offensive coordinator you can and just, and trust that person. So I don't think it has to be this one thing. But I think to me, it's more about, and just, it kind of resonated listening to Eric Kendricks and Brian O'Neill talk and other things you've heard. They need to find not a best friend, but somebody has more leadership in terms of,
yes,
not just the way, trying to think the right way to say it, just to bring the best out of guys and not have them always on eggshells. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Because I felt like last couple of years, I felt like guys were on eggshells. Whenever Zim got mad or tight, the temperature in that, people tell you, like, you could tell when Zim was grumpy because the temperature inside that building was hot, and I just don't know that that's the best way to get a team, the best out of a team.
Yeah, and I don't understand, and it's quite apparent that it's a regular occurrence. So I guess it's something I just don't get. I don't understand why a coach is allowed to dictate the mood of the building. I get the locker room, but the building, it's like, oh man, Zim's mad today. It's like, so who cares? Like the Will should go to tell him, sit down, shut up, and don't be a grouch. Why are you allowing him to dictate the entire mood around a building? The players are in a little bit more of a precarious position, but you know what, Chipper too, I think the reality of what was said today is this: the changes have just started, but there's a lot more to come. Like
in terms of what? In terms of what? Like
in terms of players, in terms of guys,
front office, you mean, or just?
Well, no, I'm saying the changes. I think he's going to go through the locker room and trim a lot of guys out. Some fair, some perhaps not fair. I also think if we're talking about the level of collaboration that they are, you're going to have some people who have been there a long time who probably are gone. As far as scouts go, as far as because this guy is. I think it's very clear this guy is smart enough to know what he doesn't know. And the most dangerous people are those who come along, and we've all seen these people, right? I've got the answers. And then like after 2 times, you're like, you're an idiot. Yeah. Those people are going to have to be gone. And you are going to basically have to build an infrastructure there as far as the scouting department goes, as well as far as football ops go, where you are comfortable that everybody knows what they're supposed to be doing, as opposed to, hey, dude, you're new. I've got this one. It's like, no, you don't have this one.
Yeah, and it'll be a gradual process because it's not something you come in and do in 2 weeks.
Correct.
And you're into the off-season cycle where you're scouting. So you're not going to do it this year, probably, by and large. It's
not
going to
be the draft. You're right.
No. So it'll be over the course of the year. And there'll be some guys that just say, you know what, this isn't for me. I'm from a different, and there'll be some people that they decide, this person's not on board with what we're doing. So I think there'll be, I agree, Judd. I just feel this feels like such a radical departure from that organization and what we've seen and how they've been run, that I think it's probably good you turn over some personnel. And I hate to say, it's easy for me to say people lose their job, but it's probably necessary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of a fresh start all the way through. And there's some of the roster, there's nothing, you can't get 53 new players, so you're, but I think just in what they're building. And we saw it with like when Falvey came in, I'm probably with the Timberwolves too, that you build out different departments as you see, like, hey, we need more of this. We need, so I think that organization is going to go undergo a pretty significant makeover. Like this time next year or this time next summer, I think there's going to be a lot of new faces and probably, just departments that, go through a lot of different personnel, honestly.
Yeah. I think the example, the best example to use, and it's not just a complete parallel, but it's going to be similar in the decisions, because I think this guy's smart. He's going to take time. Like, he's going to evaluate people. I think he's probably going to give a lot of people at least a year. But I think what Bill Guerin did, because Bill Guerin gave that some time and then he hit the button. And when he hit the button, a lot of people went. And I think that's what you're going to see here, which is a guy who's patient, a guy who's smart, but you can't be a person who suffers fools. And so at some point in time, you say, you know what? I've seen enough now. It's go time. And I think that's where we see pretty quick changes, but it's going to be gradual to get there, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's interesting because he clearly has either before or right now a strong relationship with Andrew Miller, the CEO or whatever his title is.
CEO. Yes.
CEO.
And from a baseball background.
From a baseball background, and Miller's been there. This is his third year, second or third year.
Kevin Warren.
So I'm sure. Yeah. Well, this is Kevin's. Did they go a full year without?
Yes, they did.
It's second, 2 or 3, but he's still relatively new there.
Mm-hmm.
But he's been there long enough to have some ideas of what's gone wrong and what needs to be fixed, and kind of keeping score, probably either privately or whatever. So I'm guessing he's going to have a big impact on how that process goes too.
Yes, and a lot of people quietly behind the scenes, I think, have departed from the business side, and so this is going to get. And I mean, the thing is when Kevin was here, Kevin Warren always fancied himself a football guy. Andrew, I came here from a baseball background. I definitely don't think that he fancied himself a football guy, but this move is going to get him more into the football ops. So it's going to be a very interesting time now to see how power potentially shifts, how decisions change. Like, this is going to be, if nothing else, one of the most interesting Minnesota sports experiments.
Well, let's, you mentioned it, scouting. Well, do you keep the same scouting structure, the same heads, scouting people over the long term? Now you do right now,
right?
But, I know Rick Spielman picked the players, but he took the advice of his scouts, and they've had some really bad drafts, Judd. I mean, they just have, and
didn't find a quarterback.
No, and so that you do wonder. That's the one area where you wonder, in a year or so, once he's had time to evaluate and talk to people, if they say, you know what, we need to kind of shake up that department and look at scouting in a different way.
Chip Scoggins, there's one thing that you and I both look at in the same way, and that is our relationship with the best IPA in the entire state. Heck, I call it the world Surly Furious IPA. The great thing, Chipper, is when it comes to coaches, when it comes to GMs, their searches. But I know for us, when it comes to our choice of a beverage on a Friday night, there's no choice, correct?
I found in a place that you can buy in bulk, the 12 packs.
Oh my God.
Oh boy.
It was money. It was money.
Oh, you're so happy. It's a honey hole. You're not going to release it. There it is. You can't tell people.
It's the 12 packs, buddy.
Oh God.
He brought home a couple 12 packs. So I'm good. I'm stocked up. I'm good. I'm ready for championship Sunday. Let's go.
Oh, it's going to be great. Hey, on the coaching front too. So I've thought about this as well, because I agree with you on if the person can lead and is dynamic, the side of the football on which he coaches shouldn't be held against him. But I will say this, the more I think about this one, because I'm pretty convinced Kirk Cousins is gone. He certainly, if he's not gone in 2022, will not be retained after that. I don't see any way that they sign him to an extension. So that being said, the one thing on a coach that I'm curious about is you've got to think that with all we've talked about, collaboration, working together, all of that good stuff, Chip, that the coach and the GM are going to be charged with, as a team, finding the QB, because the fatal flaw with Kirk was Rick said, I got your quarterback, Mike. And Mike's like, I don't want that quarterback at that price. Yeah. So I guess the one thing I'm curious about is if they would go with an offensive coach based on that fact, because I don't know if you would trust a defensive guy to ID a quarterback. And I'm pretty certain that the goal here is going to be, in the next couple of years at least, to draft one, have that guy step into a starting role, and then get all of that valuable cap space back because you've got a young quarterback.
Yeah, and part because you just look at, I mean, if you watch like the Chiefs and Bills game, and like, you know, or even, you know, like Herbert, or, you know, just some of these young Stafford guys, you need that relationship between the coach and quarterback. You can't go through what they just went through. I mean, that was a joke. That was ridiculous, where there was no relationship. And so, can a defensive guy have that relationship with the head coach? I think, or with the quarterback? I think so.
Sure.
But if you're an organization that has, for years, decades, struggled to find a guy that you can say, here's our guy for the next 10 years, would it be better to have the offensive-minded head coach so he's picking it and really has that expertise? Probably.
Right.
But again, to me, it goes back to find the best leader that's going to get the most out of your locker room. And if he happens to be a defensive guy, ask that guy who he's going to hire as his offense coordinator and make sure you're good with that. I just don't think you can pigeonhole. We got to be an offensive guy and let a guy who you feel really strongly about, who's a great leader, just not pass him by because you say, well, we got to have an offensive guy because that's what everybody expects us to do.
Right. Because that has to be at the top of Kwesi's list, right? Privately, find a quarterback. Like, I know that there's a lot of things, but I have to think that the Wilfs in a private session with him at one point said, okay, here's the deal. You know, Rick was here a long, long time, and he literally never found one. Kirk is statistically good, but I'm saying as far as a quarterback that can get you to a Super Bowl.
Well, if I'm the Wilfs, within a half hour of that interview starting, I have to ask him, like, what would you do with Cousins? And how are you going to get us out of this situation? Because it's like, you know what? That decision is going to affect you for the next 5 to 10 years.
Yes.
Because you have to know, okay, trade him this year, let him play it out, extend him, which I don't think they should do. You know, what are your thoughts on Kellen Mond? If you think he's the guy, or do you just say, you know what, he doesn't fit what I want, I'm going to have to draft a guy this year or next year? And so you get through all the collaboration and, you know, working together and all that. Well, let's get down to meat and potatoes. Like, what are you going to do about this quarterback situation?
Amen, brother. That's exactly what yes. Let's talk about football decisions. I don't care how you get there. Like, you can make them bring in crowdsource. I don't give a crap. But what is your decision going to be? And like, do you have the ability to do the one thing that I really think the last person in this town who coached or was in charge of the Vikings who had an eye for QB play was Denny. Brad thought he did, but he really didn't. And again, he went the route of, well, screw it, I'm going to go get Brett Favre. But it has been a long time since I would say that there's been anybody either at Winter Park or now TCO who I would trust to, you know, say, okay, you can go find a quarterback.
And here's the thing, Judd. That is not a decision you can just ease into. I mean, hell, you got to have you got to have a plan here pretty quick.
Hell's good.
Okay, hell, you got to have a plan here pretty quick.
Yes.
Right? I mean, if you're going to try to trade him, you need to start having those conversations like today. Or, you know,
March.
Well, yeah, I mean, but you got to start with your coach. Well, obviously with your coach.
But Chipper, there's only one phone call. You start with. Cleveland, Ohio area code.
Yeah.
You call your old
You know
team,
those guys. Yeah.
You know them. And guess what? I think that Stefanski can't stand Baker. And I think that Stefanski probably thinks I had success with Kirk. Kirk is an improvement on Baker. And Kirk was so mistreated by Mike that he'll be fine with me. My personal contention is Kirk will never get to a Super Bowl. But all that being said, I think your first phone call in trying to move Kirk is to your old team, the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, and they have the offensive line. They have the running game, the things that are conducive to drawing his for him to be at his best. So yeah, so that's the thing. It's like, yeah, there's going to be a feeling out process with him with figuring out, like, this department, that department, collaboration, and all this. But when it comes to personnel, I mean, hey, Danielle Hunter is due a pretty big bonus here pretty soon, right?
Yes.
You're going to pay it. So like, it's going to come fast and furious, like the personnel decisions, because heck, we're almost in February now, and so this is not. That's the thing. It's like he has to hit the ground running with the roster part.
Right. So if we actually explore that path too, Chipper, if you go down the path of how we think that he's going to see this roster, I think his background would lead us to believe this. The Vikings are going to make decisions not just based on the players themselves, but the positions which they play, right? So I think Daniil, I think they're going to try and keep him because he plays a premium spot. He's been hurt, but
you have to.
But you don't let though. But that being said, safeties disposable.
Yeah.
Very disposable. Linebackers more disposable. Running backs incredibly disposable. So my point is, if I was to try to handicap what is going to be done in the coming months, I think Hunter has the best chance of staying, but I think Smith is probably gone. I think Kendricks might be gone. Dalvin's such a unique talent, and I don't think he's gone. I'm not sure there. And the guy who has to take a pay cut for sure, Thielen.
Yeah.
Like, I think he'll stay with a substantial, but they're going to cut his pay significantly, or I think he's probably gone.
Yeah, he seems like the obvious one, and I can see him because of everybody knows the relationship and all. I can see him doing it, but yeah, I mean, there's it's funny. He was Kwesi said as soon as he got done with the press conference, he's going to start calling these players, and that's all well and good, but when you're the GM and you're having to cut salaries, and you got to be a shark, right? You can be nice about it, but it's still a cutthroat business, and you're going to ask guys to take pay cuts, and you're going to tell guys you're getting cut, and so there's not a lot of collaboration in that, right? I mean, there's a ruthlessness, and I think he probably has seen it. He talked about when he was in Cleveland, Barry gave him some of those responsibilities because what he said in his press conference, he didn't want the first time he had to do that is when he was GM.
Right.
So, hey, you have to cut this player today.
You cut this guy.
Yeah. So it's not the first time he's done it or contract negotiation. So it's not like he's never done this stuff, but it's your team now, and this is part of it. And so that roster, when you're, 11 million over the cap, and
11 plus,
if you can't figure out the quarterback thing right now, you got to shed salary somewhere.
One more thing. What do you think about this one, Chipper? Because, and he mentioned this, and I think fans don't like this. And I know that it took forever for the Sixers in the NBA to get this right, but it's the process, not the results. Okay. Yeah. That is trust the process came from that. What do you think about a purge for 22? Now I would call in a guy like Jefferson and say, we're going to get good by doing this, but a purge for 22, if you like a quarterback in April, you draft him, but I think the 23 quarterback class is superior to this one. Correct. And so you bring in a bit, so you trade Kirk, you go with a bridge QB who might be okay, not great. And it's not that you purposely tank, because I think football is impossible to purposely tank, but you don't care. And the greater good is it gets you a better draft pick And it also allows you to firmly reset the culture and how the team works.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Cincinnati. What's happened when they got Joe Burrow? And if Jefferson needed any reassurance, you could talk to Chase, right? Bengals wide receiver, and see if he's happy with Joe Burrow. Yeah,
exactly. You know, and vice versa with Joe Burrow.
But yeah, so that's the thing is I mean, I just don't. I don't know anything about Kellerman. I don't. I mean, you hear different things behind the scenes, but percentage wise, if you're going to find your quarterback for the next 10 years, he's going to have to be a first rounder and a high first rounder, right?
Yes.
We all know the Tom Brady and all those examples. It does happen, but okay.
Russell Wilson.
So, yeah, I mean, and that's kind of been their thing, is like they've been in that gray area where, like, the Wild always was, right? They were good enough to be considered a fringe, but not good enough to get that top pick that would put you over the edge. And so, well, I do think if you trade Cousins, you would have to have a bridge quarterback. But if you went with Mond, you're probably going to be in that spot, right? I mean, you're not going to be.
That's true. Yeah, I didn't think.
I would think. You know, I mean, maybe you might luck out and get a Case Keenum type thing, and you know, a guy performs better than what you expected. But I wouldn't be. Listen, they've got to solve that. They absolutely have to solve that position. I mean, because you're not going to go forward very far until you get the guy.
Correct.
So you get your guy. I mean, I don't know there's any other way to say it. They have to solve that.
Yes. And I don't think that it has to be, oh my God, we got to draft a quarterback in April. I think it's going to be far more calculated. And again, if you like a guy, that's fine, Chip. But if you don't, 23 sounds like a pretty solid QB draft. And so I think there's going to be a level of patience here that Rick and Mike didn't have. And I also think, so I don't think teams can purposely in this sport tank. Like you can't just be like, we're just going to lose games on purpose. But with how things are going to become in some ways almost mathematically quantifiable, I do think you could put yourself in a position to not be good, if that sounds fair.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
So
I mean,
I just think it's going to be, I think what we're being fed by Mark Wilf about, you know, I expect to be super competitive in 2022. That's all well and good, but if this guy's as smart as I think he is, I think there's going to be some cold, calculated decisions made privately that are going to become obvious eventually.
Judd, yeah, and it's interesting to hear the perceptions on this roster, because I think too much of the time, media, fans, whatever, get consumed with the top five, Jefferson, Dalvin, Harrison, that we don't look at the 53. And I did this the other day.
Correct.
They go, well, they got Justin Jefferson. They're not going to be terrible. I went through their too deep on defense, and I was looking at it. I was like, okay, 4 years from now, based on age, performance, contract, how many of these guys would I guess are going to be core contributors?
Yep.
I thought, well, if they get Daniil figured out, Daniil should. Then I looked at it, I was like, and like they don't have the 22 to 26-year-old guy over there.
Yeah.
Or guys that are like, okay, this guy's going to be, you know, he's going to be part of the long term. They just don't have it. And so that roster needs a major turnover. Especially the defense needs a major influx of young talent.
Yes. Before Zim started to absolutely detest the sight of you guys, not me, at press conferences in training camp, he was actually insightfully pissed off. And do you recall he gave a quote? It might have been, I forget if it was at a press conference or it was like to just Joe Schmidt. But anyway, Mike gave a quote about, like, after the 26th guy on this roster, I don't feel good about this.
Yeah.
That's a massive indictment. Like, that is, he basically said from 27 on down to 53, I don't like this team. And now that's a
problem.
It's a Bush League thing to say, but it's also incredibly insightful. And I don't think he was inaccurate. So, like, you're exactly right. The too deep scares you, and there's not a lot to develop from that.
No, I mean, and his 26 are all veteran guys. Harrison.
Yep.
You know, Kendricks, Daniil Hunter. I mean, Barr.
He saw Barr in that group. Yes.
Patrick Peterson. I mean, it's all older guys. It's like, I just looked at it. It's like, I don't even know 4 years from now who's going to be on that defense that you think.
Oh, yeah.
I go across the line. Daniil, linebacker, like Kendricks 4 years from now. Do you think Harrison Smith?
Does Dantzler make it? Like, does Dantzler develop?
Like, would you say he's a slam dunk?
No, I wouldn't.
I mean, Cameron Bynum.
Gladney was a first-round pick who you had to cut.
Well, people say, like, yeah, and somebody mentioned me, like, DJ Wanham. Like, that's what you're hanging your hat on?
Come again?
Yeah, I was like, yeah, there's just no slam dunks. And so that's where I think, we can get enamored with Justin Jefferson and Dalvin and the individual stars at the top. But when you look at the total 53,
that's a great point.
They have a lot of work to do to fix and kind of replenish, because it's top heavy. We've said it all along. This roster is top heavy.
Chip Scoggins, great stuff. In fact, you know what? Cheers. Cheers to you, my friend. Enjoy your Surly Furious IPA, because I know I will. I'll talk to you next week.
All right, brother.
Talk to you. Bye.